It's Friday, everyone, and you're watching CBC News BC. I'm Benit Rach. We're here in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Let's get to your top stories today. Well, BC Conservative leader John Rustad is in Vancouver this morning, and the focus is on women's health and reproductive health. He's promising to expand coverage for IVF treatment from 1 round to 2 and implementing compassionate leave for people going through a miscarriage.
What we will do is we are going to make sure that there can be 1 month of grievance of leave that's available for a mother who has in that unfortunate situation to be able to help her, to be able to help get through so that she doesn't feel that she needs to be rushed immediately to go back into the workforce and to go back to her job.
And he's also pledging more funding for cervical and ovarian cancer research and financial support for families who want to adopt and to train more midwives in the province. And BC NDP leader David Eby, he's in Comox this morning. The focus is on housing. He says more small-scale, multi-unit homes will bring more housing for the middle class in the next decade.
Part of the work that we've been doing is getting rid of the red tape to build housing where families can live together, where someone with a single-family home can actually have that home turned into 2 or 3 units without endless bureaucracy and process. That's a game changer. Experts say that's going to create 300,000 more middle-income homes in the next 10 years.
And he's also reiterated promises to crack down on those buying up homes and using them for profit or with investment, with the speculation and vacancy tax, which his party is promising to expand if elected. And the 7 Vancouver police officers involved in the beating death of Miles Gray have been cleared of wrongdoing after a Police Act investigation. So the 33-year-old was killed during a violent encounter with police in Burnaby 9 years ago. And a coroner's inquest last year determined that Gray's death was a homicide. Well, now a police discipline authority found none of the officers committed misconduct or abused their authority. And Gray's sister says this whole process has made her lose faith in the system to keep people accountable.
I miss my brother every day. I just feel really done with everything. But then I try and remind myself, I can still live a good, positive life, and I don't have this guilt hanging over me like I know that those people have.
So in the 85-page Police Act investigation report, Delta Police Chief Neil DeBoard notes the limitations of the probe that he was tasked with, adding that there was very limited witness testimony and no cross-examination. In a statement, Vancouver police say the multiple investigations into this case have taken too long and caused significant stress for everyone involved. All right, well, did you see them? I'm talking about the northern lights here that dazzled skies across much of Canada last night, even here in BC. I think this was on Mount Seymour. A strong geomagnetic storm is underway, which is a disturbance of the Earth's magnetic field. It's caused by solar activity on the sun, and images like these that were posted on social media, some of them were sent to us, show these lights in many different forms and colors from different parts of the province. And honestly, don't worry if you missed them or slept through them. This storm will kind of continue today. The G4 storm is still in place for tonight, so take a look up. And those are your headlines. I'm Benit Rach. You're watching CBC News BC. Stay with us. More news and updates coming up. BC Today is up next.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Well, this week's leaders' debate got heated over Indigenous land rights and reconciliation. We'll ask, what do you think of what you've heard from the leaders about the DRIPA legislation and economic reconciliation? What are the election issues affecting Indigenous people and communities? That's in our first half hour. And Brian Minter will be here to talk about bringing your garden to the Thanksgiving dinner table. Let us know what you're harvesting for your feast. And as always, he's taking your questions. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Thanks for joining us. We're live on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and on live stream as well. Well, on Tuesday's leaders' debate, questions about Indigenous rights and land use were posed to each of the three party leaders, and there seemed to be competing approaches. And so here's a clip that begins with Conservative leader John Rustad describing his view of economic reconciliation.
We want to make sure that what we're doing with First Nations is creating those opportunities for success. I have seen it when I have a young lady that comes to me and says, I'd like to give you a meat offering. And I say, what for? Because you put a program in place that gave me some training. I got my first job. I was living on the street as a single mom. I had my child on the street. I couldn't look after my child. Now I have a job. I'm back doing some training. I have another job. And I just want to say thank you. That is what economic reconciliation is, connecting with people, making sure they have an opportunity to build a future and look after the kids. That's what any parent would want in the province. That's what we need to deliver when we're working with First Nations in BC.
Well, I don't know if I would compare a relationship with First Nations to parent and child. I would compare it as a partnership, as a true partnership. We're working together to build a province here. And when we work together, amazing things happen. You know, some of the most successful projects in this province are joint projects with Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people, and it improves life in the whole community. John, I just can't disagree with you more that your first action would be to repeal a law that just recognizes the rights that we know Indigenous people have in this province. Why would you pick a fight with Indigenous people as one of your first steps? We got to work together
because
here.
John just wants to take us back to the 20th century. It's where he feels most comfortable. It's where he feels that we should be going. He cannot see a future that's different from the one in the past that he's had. And he cannot see a future that's unlike what the BC Liberals created when he was a cabinet minister in their government.
All right, you heard there from the three major party leaders, Sonia Furstenau, David Eby, and John Rustad. Well, we're asking you, what are the election issues affecting Indigenous people and communities in BC? And what do you think of what you've heard from the party leaders on Indigenous land rights and economic reconciliation? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. If you'd like to email us, we're at bctoday@cbc.ca. And we have a panel joining us to discuss this as well. Regional Chief Terry Teegee from the BC Assembly of First Nations and a member of the Takla Nation. And Robert Phillips, a First Nations Summit political executive and a member of the Checheskin Canam Lake Nation. And we are also waiting for Chief Wayne Christian from the Secwepemc Nation and Deputy Chair of the First Nation Health Council. Chief Teegee and Chief Phillip, welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Terry Teegee, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, thank you so much for being with us. What are your thoughts on this idea of economic reconciliation as presented by John Rustad?
Well, the position from John Rustad, and we heard it time and again about economic reconciliation in terms of the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It's not merely economics. You know, what we saw and what is determined by the United Nations and also here in British Columbia by many landmark court cases is to have a full expression of sovereignty and self-determination. Certainly there is the inescapable component of economic development, but further to that, as nations, as decision makers, we need to the full expression of sovereignty and self-determination as you know, in such as landmark cases that stated we can govern ourselves in Belgamuka, the proving of title in Silcotin territory. You know, that's what we're really seeking And out of that, and out of those decision-making powers, and out of the expression of the declaration, there is an economic component. It's not merely just economics. It's much more than that. It's taking care of our own affairs in terms of decision making, child welfare, taking care of our territory, our lands, waters, etc. That's what really UNDRIP is about, and it's very disconcerting that what we've heard from the position of the Conservative Party, John Rustad.
So you're saying it's an incomplete representation of what economic reconciliation should be. Is that right?
Correct, and certainly his position to not necessarily repeal but revamp the declaration legislation is very concerning to many First Nations across the province. Now, what the leader for the Green Party, Sonia Furstenau, stated is exactly right. You can't keep going to court. We do have an ability to make decisions of ourselves. And what we heard from David Eby was, some of the truth about, going over the last several years, the working on the implementation of Bill C-41, United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. It does take partnership, and we have been working with the NDP to implement the declaration. We have seen Section 6 and 7 agreements in the Tahltan Nation. We have seen even further to that is the recognition of title for the Haida Nation. So it's, some of these, the work we're doing with the NDP may not be, we do have some missteps there, or there are some challenges, but nevertheless, we're moving in the right direction.
And Robert Phillips, to you, what stands out for you and what's being put on offer here from the three leaders?
Well, I think first of all, I agree with Regional Chief Terry Teegee. Just looking at it from a perspective of this is Aboriginal title lands, and now we have a Declaration Act and a UN Declaration Act as well in Canada, all from the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And, I think Rustad should understand. He was a cabinet member back in the days of Premier Christy Clark, and he was there to witness when Premier Campbell tried to do the court case and it was unsuccessful. And we're talking, this is going to take us back decades if we don't have the UN Declaration and Declaration Act here in British Columbia. And we're not just talking, as mentioned, economics. We're talking about, this is going to take us back decades in education, children and families, lands and resources, climate change, all of those things that we've been building on here towards. But if you want to talk economics, these agreements that he goes around and talks about, Rustad, the 435, there were 2, 3, 4% when it came to the forest and range agreements. First Nations were signing these under duress. And the strategy that should be put in place is not make First Nations poor in their own lands, but to enhance it, to have a regional strategy throughout British Columbia where First Nations are prosperous, because what happens then? That means regional parts and isolated regional areas across British Columbia will then have prosperous First Nations that can buy houses, go get groceries, buy cars, and it will just mean an economic prosperity for the whole regions. It just makes sense that we build on partnerships, not divide, not racially division, not prejudice, not everything that we've been hearing over and over and over in this campaign, one mistake after another. And I do believe if we don't do that, we're going to see some politics that's been happening down in the United States. And I just can't stand for that.
We do have Chief Wayne Christian now from the Secwepemc First Nation and Deputy Chair of the First Nation Health Council. Welcome to you. And let me follow up on that. Is it necessarily true that First Nations who sign on to economic benefit agreements do so under duress? We know, for example, with Trans Mountain, there have been groups, coming together and saying they want this stake in the Trans Mountain pipeline, and they see that as economic reconciliation. What do you make of that? Is there a role for this definition of economic reconciliation then?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and thanks to Regional Chief and Robert Phillips for responding. I think in terms of reconciliation, I think we really have to look at this from the concept of health in terms of the health and well-being of our people. What we're noticing and what's unfolding vis-a-vis the candidates for the progressive conservatives, they're out and out sort of attacks on our people, the most vulnerable, our people that are on the streets. They're utilizing sort of the tactics that has been used by the President Trump in the U.S. And I think that is really quite telling if you have a leader that can't actually lead his, in this case, his caucus.
Where do you
Because
see the
they're off,
comparison there? Where
doing
specifically,
things
where do you see the comparison with Donald Trump?
by the conspiracy theories. Simply put,
Which ones?
what he says publicly, that climate change doesn't exist,
Okay.
If you
Or that
start
it's
naming go to the specifics of what's going on, I think that he's really taken a page out of the campaign from the South.
okay. And just to clarify, just because we've had John Rustad on, and he's said that he acknowledges climate change exists, is an issue, but that says that it is not a crisis that needs to be addressed right now. So just to clarify from what we've heard from John Rustad on this show and elsewhere as well. Let's take a call now. My panel here talking to us about what issues are most important to you. If you are Indigenous and identify as Indigenous, you can call us. Let us know what are the election issues that most affect Indigenous people and communities. What do you think of this debate and discussion around DRIPA and First Nations land rights and economic reconciliation? What does that actually look like? Give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Gabriel is joining us from Victoria. Hi, Gabriel, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm a newcomer. I do work as a political advisor for First Nations in the area of education. I just wanted to comment on the so-called economic reconciliation and what really is at this point the absent question of First Nations political rights. The Conservatives, like with everything else they're bringing forward, they're presenting as new policies that are 30, 40, 50 years old. They want to bring back those regressive policies. I think economic reconciliation could be better thought of as corporate reconciliation. Really, the model's already there. The NDP already follows it, even though they have a better line of patter on the question. It's essentially about bribing First Nations with very cheap community benefits agreements to be junior partners in corporate resource plunder. That's really what economic reconciliation means, both in practice, if not in rhetoric. And, listen to what Rustad had to say on the debate. There's sort of three phrases that really stand out for me. If you put them together, you get a picture of exactly what I'm saying. He talks about unleashing the potential of the private sector, which, of course, we're talking about big corporations. He talks about unleashing the potential of First Nations. Then he talked about the strategic granting of land to First Nations, and he used the term strategic. Now, put those all together, and what I think you can see is that this is about unleashing big corporations on to First Nations lands with, greased by very cheap community benefits agreements. I think that the Greens are the most, let's say, far-sighted on this question, but even they, in the end, it's hard to say, beyond talk, what they actually would do. They don't actually explicitly talk about political rights, particularly what has been long established, though now long suppressed, starting in the 1980s into the 90s, the Penner Report, which is a federal Penner Report, you look at the Charlottetown Accord Amendment on First Nations, constitutional amendment. If you look at the Royal Commission, they all called for constitutionally protected First Nations self-government. And I think that should be the starting point of any discussion about national freedom for Indigenous peoples.
Gabriel, thank you very much for the call from Victoria. Robert Phillips, I saw you nodding as he started talking about what's missing here is discussion around political rights when it comes to First Nations people. What did you think of what you heard from Gabriel?
Yeah, he's right on to a certain extent, because we have the Supreme Court of Canada that recognizes Aboriginal rights and title. We have Calder in 73, Garin, Sparrow, Delgamuuk, Haida, Silcoteen, right up to the Blueberry case. That's just naming a few. And what happens is, if we do not get these agreements for the First Nations Summit as treaties, agreements, and other constructive arrangements, because we want to get into negotiations. We don't want to see protests on the ground. We don't want to see uncertainty. We want to see certainty on Aboriginal title lands, and there's Crown title. And these two have to be negotiated upon. Canada and British Columbia just don't negotiate treaties with anybody. They do it on a nation-to-nation basis, and it has to be government to government. We're talking about working together, a process in terms of decision making, not just co-management, but jurisdiction. And what happens if we get things in those areas? Then we can see climate, we can see education, we can see a lot of these agreements coming to pass. And I think that would be a good thing for all of British Columbia and all of Canada. So, I think at the end of the day, we have to have these discussions on that government to government basis.
Regional Chief TG, we just heard Robert Phillips there talk about, we don't want to see protests. And that's something I think that David Eby referred to as well in terms of what DRIPA is able to offer. But what we've heard from John Rustad is that the act creates friction between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. What do you think of that? How do you move forward avoiding those conflicts, having that clarity and certainty?
Well, the whole purpose of the implementing DRIPA as law was to avoid court cases and perhaps civil disobedience, if you will. But whether it's a court case or the declaration, is that in the end, what we're trying to do is negotiate terms of how a development occurs. It's trying to really cut to the chase where, in the court cases that my colleague mentioned, Delgamuuk, Stayaway, Haida, Chilcotin, and more recently Ahusit, who won the right to commercially fish. The problem there is that in the end, we have to negotiate something. So in the end, avoiding the many years and costly court cases that a lot of resources are put towards, we're going straight to negotiations in regards to those developments. I think the full expression of sovereignty and self-determination is to take care of your own affairs, such as child welfare, and we've definitely are doing that here in British Columbia, where we have a tripartite working group with the federal and provincial government, and also the federal legislation, Bill C-92, to really draw down jurisdiction over child welfare. So it's really that full expression is what we're seeking in regards to making decisions on the land. It's further to that is that how decisions are made. No government has a veto, and we have to create that space where all governments and decision makers come into a room and make these very important decisions. And it is a part of for our First Nations communities who have the right for full expression of their rights and title is a free, prior, and informed consent, and that's what that's what allows the declaration and its full expression here in British Columbia. And lastly, we got to remind ourselves that the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples is the minimum human rights standard. And I think we can't, express that as how important that is to recognize our human rights.
Let me wrap up with Chief Wayne Christian, who is Deputy Chair of the First Nations Health Council. When it comes to healthcare and the impact on Indigenous communities of the ongoing opioid crisis that the NDP went in government faced a lot of criticism for, what would you like to see?
Well, I think the whole concept really is community-driven sort of solutions. I think more and more you look at the issues is that the communities have the ability to make their own determination as to what would work for their people. That's what needs to be invested in. I think the continuous kind of colonial approach where you bring in outside experts and outside processes into the community does not work. And I think even the fact that I think we can look at the downtown east side as an example, with a lot of people are there, not just from British Columbia, but from right across Canada. that the best solutions that work there would involve the people that are impacted the most. And it all evolves around housing and homelessness and wraparound services. How do we begin to have those kinds of models of the social determinants of health? So you're not looking at just health, you're looking at housing, you're looking at addictions, you're looking at all of these factors that factor in to why people are on the streets. So I think in the whole paradigm of where we're going, this is the plank we have to move forward on, the foundation for a meaningful change, and we're going to change what's going on. It's more than just health, it's education. You know, it's looking at child welfare, it's looking at housing, all of these kinds of issues that are impacting our people. And so I think we have to have an overall government approach versus trying to say it's just an addictions issue, because there's not just an addictions issue. A lot of issues around trauma-informed services, how is that done properly? And I think that I think Canadians as a whole don't really understand the multi-generational impact of the residential school and all these forms and processes where our families were torn apart by trauma and the abuses that took place, and how that has a generational impact, and how we're just starting to recover from that as we take control of our health. And that's where we need to go. We need to have more resources federally and provincially sitting down with us to really develop an overall approach rather than just a siloed approach, because we know a siloed approach does not work in our communities. So I think that's where we need to go with the whole issue of healthcare. And I think it's not only us, I think society as a whole has to examine how healthcare is actually delivered and how to change it so communities are more in control of that. And I think that's the movement, I think, through the primary care centers and what they're trying to do with that process. I think it's really important.
It's very, very good to hear from all of you today. And this conversation, I'm sure, will continue. Thanks so much for joining us. Regional Chief Terry Teegee with the BC Assembly of First Nations, Robert Phillips, First Nations Leadership Council and First Nations Summit Political Executive, and Chief Wayne Christian. Well, we've got a lot of emails on this right now. David writes, the Conservative Party's stance on land rights and reconciliation would take BC backwards on not only recognizing the importance of land and resource rights, cultural respect, and movement on resolving these issues, it would also take us backwards on being able to work together on addressing issues like health and social services, socioeconomic diversification, biodiversity protection, and climate change, etc. Settlers and especially our political leaderships need to be far more open to working together and not against the tide toward more rights and respect for the diverse host nations and First Nations. Norman writes, it has been the incessant strategy of the corporate sector supported by governments to suck First Nations into economic tutelage by tossing them tidbits in mega projects, with Trans Mountain Pipeline one of many such bribery tactics. As Sonia Furstenau so well put it, Rustad wants to go back to the earlier 20th century and really to the 19th. And Scott writes, as the election unfolds, it is essential that Indigenous communities know whether political leaders have the educational background and knowledge needed to understand and support Indigenous rights and title. These issues require deep comprehension and commitment and transparency about each leader's qualifications. It's crucial for informed voting. Thank you so much for all of your emails. bctoday@cbc.ca. Just about 12:30 now. This is BC Today. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks so much for being with us this Friday afternoon. Looks quite sunny out there. We are going to have Brian Minter joining us right after the news update, and he'll take your questions, of course, and he'll talk about what you can pull out of your garden and put right onto your Thanksgiving dinner table. That's coming up after this CBC News Update with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. BC Conservative leader John Rustad has unveiled a 5-point plan for reproductive health care in the province, including expanding access to fertility treatments, supporting women after a pregnancy loss, training more midwives, and providing support for adoption. Rustad says a Conservative government would provide funds for couples on a second round of fertility treatment. There would also be a 1-month paid compassionate leave after a miscarriage. BC's Jobs Minister says the province added more than 23,000 full-time jobs over the last year. Brenda Bailey says the results of September's labour force survey show BC's unemployment rate is 6%, just below the national average of 6.5%. And the new chief administrative officer for the city of Kamloops is someone the mayor tried to fire earlier this year. Byron McCorkle has been acting CAO since March 7th. McCorkle, who has been a senior manager since 1999, was suddenly suspended by Mayor Reed Hamer-Jackson near the end of March. That decision was quickly reversed 2 days later by the rest of council. And now the forecast on the north coast, mainly sunny this afternoon with a high of 12, highs to 12 with lots of sunshine in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, sunny with a high of 11, highs to 17 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, clearing this afternoon with a high of 16, and mainly cloudy in Metro Vancouver and Greater Victoria. A bit of sunshine this afternoon in the Fraser Valley with highs around 17. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
You have a good weekend.
Thank you.
That's Robert Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Thanks so much for being with us. This is BC Today here on CBC. We're on Radio 1, and you can hear more throughout the afternoon on Radio 1 with your afternoon shows. And here's what's coming up on the Coast with Gloria Makarenko.
Michelle, hello there. It's Gloria Makarenko, and I'd love for you to join us for On the Coast this afternoon. Lido Pimienta is going to be our guest. Yeah, she's in town. She's going to have a concert on the 13th here in Vancouver, but apparently she's considering stopping live performances, or at least stopping tours after this show. Now, she's also a social commentator. She's got her own show on CBC Gem, so really looking forward to that conversation. Also, Jessica Campbell made history this week by becoming the first woman to work on the NHL coaching bench. So we'll talk about what it means for girls in the sport to see more women working professionally in the hockey world. Join us for On the Coast between 3 and 6 this afternoon.
Thank you, Gloria. Those stories and more coming up this afternoon, of course, on CBC Vancouver and On the Coast. And BC Today's gardening columnist Brian Minter joins us now. Of course, he'll take your questions about all things gardening, but also, just in time for Thanksgiving, he's going to talk about and wants to know from you, what are you pulling out of your garden for your Thanksgiving feast? Call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. If you want to email us, it's bctoday@cbc.ca. And Brian joins us now from Country Garden Limited in Chilliwack. Hello and advance happy Thanksgiving.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and same to you and to all our listeners. You know, we have lots to give thanks for. I know there's lots of challenges and problems everywhere, but we live in a pretty great country and a great province, and it's, nice to look at all the things.
And we know great people like you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. But anyway, no, seriously, we made a bit of a boo-boo this year because we're growing some food in our back fields for the food bank, and we just couldn't get it planted until probably the middle of August. And I figured, boy, this is going to be tough. But you know what? In that short time, from the middle of August to the end of September and early October, potatoes are about 4 inches across right now. Carrots are about 4 or 5 inches deep, and they're still growing like crazy. And the beets are doing great. The turnips are looking wonderful. So, in other words, even though we keep nagging folks, the middle of July is the best time to plant those crops that you can enjoy. And it doesn't have to be a big crop, even a small space garden. But Michelle, it's really hard to beat going out in your own garden, pulling out carrots, some of the kale. If you have an apple tree, a late apple tree, the fruits are just ripe right now. And to go through your garden and harvest and enjoy the fresh taste of vegetables. And it's not a big deal. It saves you money, of course.
Sure.
But it's such a nice thing to do. And you know what I really thought was great was at a garden club, and I guess in Dunbar late last fall, and the folks said, "Hey, don't forget Thursday night we're going to Sally's to pick cranberries." And cranberries don't have to grow in a bog. It's a beautiful ground cover. It's something you could just plant now. Very hardy down to zone 5, certainly the Okanagan. But there's so many things we never think of that could really, and we could be enjoying for a long time. And, depending on the weather is like, we really don't get our cold until usually mid-November, late November, going into January. But things can stay in the ground. It's not just Thanksgiving. We can have food for a considerable length of time. And the other thing that I think is really great is the fact that if you have a little bit extra, if we could please take some to the food bank. This is the time of year over the next few months where there's not as much in our local gardens, and they would sincerely appreciate that. So, more than just ourselves, it's nice to be able to grow that little bit extra, which we can share, because having nutritional food at food banks is really important.
Here, here. Brian, you've absolutely said it. Brian Minter is with me, our gardening columnist, master gardener who has been with this show for a long time, sharing all his wisdom. And we're always grateful for his advice and for your questions. So let's get to them. Our number again is 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Patty is calling us from Victoria. Hi, Patty. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Oh, thank you so much. Brian, I had a bumper crop of blueberries this year. They were just coming and looked so gorgeous until I started seeing telltale brown spots on one plant especially, but all 3 of them. And then doing research, I thought, oh my goodness, I got blueberry maggots. So now, so I picked through and I threw away all of those, half of the crop. And now I wonder if I can save the plants by putting them in different pots, by doing anything else like that.
Oh, yeah, you certainly can. For the commercial industry, it has been a problem, but we're getting certain types of organic sprays right now commercially, which are available only for the farming community, beginning to get some control on. And that happens right across the country, by the way, not just in BC. But seriously, if you can get a very fine cloth, and I think honestly, even a remake cloth, the floating row cover. Over top, when the flowers early in the season, when the flowers start to grow and develop and they start setting fruit before you see any signs of it, just simply drape this over top. You can get clear. Some of the story that's maybe a little bit hard to find, but you can get clear with the same type of cloth or material that will keep your blueberries safe. So yeah, don't give up on them. I think it's going to be fine. We just have to get the right type of material, which we can in fact put over the plant when you get this problem, and it'll keep the berries clean. You should be absolutely fine.
Over the whole plant, not over the dirt.
Oh no, of the whole plant. Just cover the plant. And that seems to be the most effective way. And so, Patty, don't give up. We have these things happen. And as the world changes, we get more extremes, we get more types of insects. But we just have to watch and learn and be more creative in how we can protect our plants.
Yeah, Patty, there you go. Okay, you can have another bumper crop of blueberries next year.
Good.
Thanks so much for the call. And let's head to Vancouver now. And Dave actually is also asking about blueberries. Hi, Dave.
Hi there.
Thanks for calling.
That's correct, yes. Yeah, I don't know if it's a repeat question, but regarding they're quite gangly, my blueberries. I get lots of blueberries, but I wonder when's the best time to prune them, and if
Dave, that's a very good question. Yeah, blueberries are one of those plants that really don't take well to pruning. And the only time I would prune is you see, for example, an overplant, some dead wood, you would take that out. And sometimes, Dave, you'll find one or two branches that are extremely strong and vigorous, and they're overpowering the plant. I would take those out as well. But essentially, as long as enough air and sunlight penetrate into the plant, you've got an open plant. Blueberries really don't need a lot of pruning, and they, matter of fact, not happy about that. So that's an easy one, Dave.
Oh, just take the dead wood out then, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And if it's getting thick in the center, we've got heavy branching, eliminate some of that. But that's why we love blueberries. They're so darn easy. They really are.
Oh, that sounds. Go ahead, Dave.
When's the best time to do that?
Yeah, good point. As the leaves fall off about mid-November, that'd be the most ideal time, because then you can actually see the structure of the plant. And if you want to thin it out and clean it up, the leaves aren't in the way. Easy to see, Dave.
Thanks very much.
Dave,
thank you.
You are so welcome. Thank you for the call. Our number again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Your gardening questions for Brian Minter. And on this Thanksgiving weekend, we have been asking as well, what are you pulling out of your garden and making for your Thanksgiving feast? We have Keith in Vancouver who has some ideas. Hi, Keith.
Hi there, how are you?
I am well. Tell us about what you have planned for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, a little different, I guess. I do plan to go out tomorrow and ideally pick a pile of mushrooms. And mushroom soup, mushroom bread pudding, pine mushroom with bacon, that kind of thing. Just, I guess, a general question. I don't know if Brian has does as much foraging, but just curious with thoughts on weather trends and things like that with regards to picking mushrooms. Of course, it varies year to year, but just curious what you have heard or seen or that kind of thing for this year and into next.
What your prospects might be, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen him for a while, but I have a friend who lives in the Okanagan, and what he does is takes folks on tours and to actually explain to them what the various types of mushrooms would look like, what type of conditions you would find them growing in. I laughed at him one year because there was a new fast food restaurant that opened in our community, and they had put all the landscaping in, and they used a certain type of bark mulch. And he spotted oyster mushrooms, and he was picking them right around. So, I mean, fungus is going to survive no matter what happens. They're one of the most valuable plants in terms of nutrition. They're absolutely great. And there's a fungus called Pestilotopsis in South America that's Dutch and American students had discovered that consumes plastic. And in 30 days, it will devour plastic. So they're invaluable. They're going to hang in no matter what happens. And, you're on the right track, Keith. I think that's great.
Keith, can you share your favorite mushroom soup recipe?
Yeah, actually, I got it from my neighbor, Vivian. It's a New York Times mushroom soup recipe. And it's basically make a mushroom paste, and then you dilute it, of course, with cream and milk. But there's a lot of different recipes out there, but this one really does stand up. I use about 4 pounds of mushrooms, so it's really heavy on the mushroom.
Nice.
And quite simple, but really tasty. So New York Times, I think you can probably easily-ish find it online.
Yeah.
But it's an older recipe from the New York Times. So that's what I use.
Oh, that's awesome. I guess, or we could go see your neighbor, Vivian.
Yeah, well, I've got a direct line. She's an amazing cook on the 3rd floor here, so it's when you get the knock on the door from Vivian, something good is going to be coming.
That's right. You will have a delicious meal ahead. Keith, so good to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Enjoy your day.
Enjoy your day too. Edith is our next caller now from Saanich. Hi, Edith.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome to the show. What's your question for Brian?
Thank you. Brian, I have an acre of land in Saanich, and I would love to grow my own vegetables. But I also I have a lot of deer and raccoons and squirrels and rabbits, and I like to see them. But I'm concerned not only about the fact that the deer will eat everything, but also I know that deer and raccoons carry certain diseases. So if I manage to fence an area off and keep the deer out of that and the raccoons out of that, how long before the soil would be safe and not carry diseases from the, or what can I do to my soil to make it safe to grow veggies? Because I don't want to pick up something from the critters.
Sure.
Yeah. Edith, I haven't heard much of an issue in that regard. Just so you know, we're growing our vegetables. We have a family of deer that frequent that area, and I've seen deer footprints all the way through, but they haven't been, destroying much or eating much. So, I don't think it's much of a problem, particularly with vegetables. They tend to go with our expensive ornamentals, the roses in particular. But anyway, seriously.
The eating it.
Oh, and I understand. Yeah. But honestly, I don't see a problem. These are wild animals. The droppings that they would, have. I mean, if you're concerned about it, I would simply pick them up and compost them, and that's what I would do. But no, we've had a garden back in this area for years, and lots of rabbits back there. Let me assure you, we have bears too, and I've never seen a problem. Never thought it had being a problem, and so no, I think you're fine, Edith. It's not something that I've heard about or had people concerned about, because we have so many British Columbians listening to this program who live in outlying areas, and the wildlife is all around. So I really don't think it's an issue, honestly, Edith.
Oh, well, that's good to know, because I was worried about roundworm and things like that.
Yeah.
Well, Edith, sounds like you can go full steam ahead. There you go.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You take care. That's Edith in Saanich. I have an email question here for you about peppers. And I know sometimes we've gotten these, as we head into fall, Brian, we get these calls about, tomatoes not turning red yet.
Yep.
And so Joan is writing, my peppers are still growing and not yet turning red. How long can I leave them before picking them? And also I heard that peppers were perennial. So if that's true, how would I ensure their growth for the next spring or summer? Do I have to cut them down? And Joan is writing from Victoria.
Yeah, and just a couple of things about the peppers. Until we have a frost, the rain can be devastating on them, certainly on tomatoes in particular. But no, what I would do if they're out in the garden growing in the soil, make a temporary canopy over top with clear polyethylene. That'll keep them dry from the rain, which is a problem. But also, when we're getting this wonderful warm days right now, it'll heat them up and help that ripening much more quickly. So until we get a frost, the peppers will hang in there more than you think. The only problem is if you're going to grow hot peppers, they really should be in containers, because whereas a normal pepper, say a bell pepper, would be 80 to 90 days to mature, some of the hot peppers are 160 days. They take a lot longer to mature. So that's the only thing in strategy in terms of where you're growing them. But at this point here, keep the rain off them, give them the warmest location, give protective covering over top, Michelle, and no, I think we'll get another 2-3 weeks out of our pepper plants yet.
Okay. And are they perennial? Will they come back next year?
Well, certain varieties, I mean, they are a plant that, yes, if you could put them in a controlled environment, a greenhouse, for example, something like that, you can keep them going. Look at our commercial pepper production. Year after year, they don't plant new peppers in every year. They are perennial. So a lot depends on the varieties and so on, which we learned over years with experience. But yeah, if you've got a greenhouse and they're in containers, just simply shift them inside and keep eating peppers until Christmas or beyond.
There you go, Joan. Thank you very much for your email. It's bctoday@cbc.ca. Let's head now to the Northeast. And Christine is calling us from Fort St. John. Hi, Christine.
Hi.
Hi, thanks so much for calling. And you actually have a greenhouse and you have a question about your green tomatoes.
Yes, I have a greenhouse. It's unbelievable in the north here up on the Alaska Highway, the way just so many houses, ordinary houses, have greenhouses.
Lovely.
And so I was new to it, but as you had said, I planted my tomatoes late-ish. And in the Kootenays where I was, if that happened, I wrapped them, and I had sometimes boasting about ripening tomato at Christmas. So I'm not sure what to do with my huge basket of green tomatoes.
Now, they're still on the plant, are they? Christine,
I picked some of the vines, and they're hanging in the garage. And then I've got some that are just picked in a big basket.
Yeah. Okay. I probably, well, again, if you don't want to heat the greenhouse, because it is expensive heating a greenhouse, no question about that. But the idea is simply is, you know, I would have left them on the vine as long as possible, because
Okay,
once you make
I've
that
still
cut,
got a few I can do that.
have you? Good. Okay. No, they will continue to ripen. The trouble is you're losing your light up there more quickly than we
Yeah.
are, and they do need supplemental light. If you possibly can do that, a grow light or even fluorescent tubing, anything to extend those days to the ones you have left. And Christine, if you can keep the temperature to like a minimum of 10 degrees Celsius. That seems to be the breaking point in terms of them going backwards. But if you give them light, them continue to grow and produce and ripen, and you can keep them 10 degrees night temperature now, nowhere below 10 degrees. You'll find they'll continue on for some time right now. But again, inevitably, because during the daytime things are things are closing in, it's cooler. All the elements are coming together in terms of
Yeah.
making the end of the season for them. So it's a lighting and the 10-degree temperature that I think if you do that, no telling how long you can keep them going. Absolutely.
And is that roots in the ground, or can I
No.
pull them out with?
Yeah, roots
the-
roots in a pot or a container or roots in the ground. But they do need that root system to be able to pull in moisture and pull in food and
Yeah.
everything need to survive. But we are getting near the end. We have to realize that. So we've done well. But I'm proud of you having a greenhouse up there. That's wonderful. So it'll buy you a little more time, Christine. I think that's all it can do is just buy you time.
There you go. Christine, thank you very much. I love her description of greenhouses just dotting the landscape. To me,
Yeah.
that's just such a lovely description. Thanks for the call
It
from
is.
Fort St. John. And Sheila is on the line now. Let's head to Nanaimo. Hi, Sheila.
Hi, Brian.
Hi.
I have a question about my dahlias. This was my very first year growing them, and it was really successful. It was amazing. But I live
Beautiful.
at the foot of the mountain, and as of now, they're in shade. Of course, there's still lots of buds, and they're still blooming.
Mhm.
But they are not going to dry out between now and July. So my problem is more rot than frost.
Mm.
And I'm
Yeah.
wondering, how do I know when to lift them when they're still green and, they're not freezing, but they could easily
Yeah,
rot?
That's an incredibly good question, Sheila, because a lot of folks are in the same boat right now. The dahlias that we have, as I look at neighborhoods and so on right now, still going gangbusters. I see a little mildew because of the rain we had and some of the leaves, which is, that's inevitable. But for the most part, the normal situation is when the frost blackens the foliage and they start to deteriorate, that's when to get them out of the ground. Or in some cases, talking about mildew, if we're getting mildew and so on, it is a fungus disease. Then we can cut them off. So anytime that it's nice to carry a little bit longer, I would say late October would be great, early November, depending on where we are in the province, of course. But that's the time to be able to cut them off and carefully lift them with a fork and get them dried. That's the most important thing. And you'll be absolutely fine. So no, you've got time yet, and keep picking and harvesting. I know at the flower auction, so many local growers are still producing dahlias for the flower auction.
Wow.
And yeah, let's keep it going.
Love
Another
that.
2 weeks or 3 weeks anyway, I would think. Okay, Sheila?
Sheila, thank you very much for the call. We have a couple more minutes here with Brian, about 3 or 4 minutes. And Cody is back calling us from Trail. Hello, Cody.
Hello, Michelle. How are you? Hi, Brian. Happy Thanksgiving
Cody.
to you both.
Yeah, thank you.
You too.
And Brian, I have a question about pumpkins. What sort of seed do you get to cross to get a white pumpkin? I've seen them up here lately at the grocery stores, and I've always wondered about what sort of seed you have to cross to get a pumpkin nut color. I know
Yeah.
for the people that are growing the giant pumpkins, they would probably know. But I've always wondered what you have to pollinate to get a pumpkin nut color.
Yeah, Cody, to answer your question, I don't know where the white pumpkins originated, but they've been around for at least 50 years. Of course, they have never been in it. Orange has always been the color, but now pumpkins are designer pumpkins. They're in pastels and blues and everything. I mean, it's about design, not about pumpkins being for Halloween anymore. No, but seriously, wherever it did start, from a sport or coming out of a particularly orange one. But don't forget, we're living in a very isolated area here around the world. I mean, in the Caribbean, pumpkins are part of their main diet. It's a wonderful thing. They are great. And when I was in Florida many years ago with garden writers, the space travel, they were looking at long-term travel. Eventually, pumpkins are one of the food sources that they were looking for space. And so, I mean, they're more than just a little jack-o'-lantern. But no, there's so many varieties of whites today. Yeah, no crossing. From the tiny snowball ones to the giant crystal series. The thing is to get them pure white, Cody. A lot of them are sort of the off-white, but the pure white ones are the prettiest. And I got to tell you, they're almost as popular as some of the orange ones. There's a big thing about having a white pumpkin. Yeah, and they're fun. They really are. Easy to grow. We grow lots of them.
Yeah, and space is going to be pretty, apparently. Pumpkin pretty. I have time for just one email question here. And Karen is asking about when is the best time to move her apple tree. It's got early, mid, late season varieties, Parkland, September Ruby, and Woodland. It's just completed its 4th season, producing well, but it needs to be moved. And talk about wet weather, Karen is at Haida Gwaii.
Yeah, and that's great and wonderful because we're close to it now. As soon as the leaves drop, then the plant is officially dormant. And from that point on, now here the other factor is make sure the soil is moist. If the soil is bone dry, and I don't expect that'll happen in Haida Gwaii, but the point is if the soil is moist and the leaves are off the trees, you have from that particular moment, usually mid-November, until about the end of February, that's your window for pruning. That's your window for digging the trees carefully and moving to a new location. So that dormant season. So get ready, mark your calendar November 15th, and we're going to move that apple tree.
That's right. There you go, Karen. Get that calendar out. Put the little reminder in there. Perhaps a picture of an apple tree. Karen, thank you. And Brian, always such a pleasure. You have a wonderful Thanksgiving, okay?
Sure will. And to all the wonderful listeners out there, it's always so good to be with you every couple of weeks. So have a great Thanksgiving. Thanks, Michelle.
Absolutely. You take care. Brian Minter, our BC Today gardening columnist. He joined us from Minter Country Gardens in Chilliwack. That's it for us today. Thank you to all of you for your calls and your emails. Always great to hear from you. And we'll be off the air Monday for Thanksgiving. So join us next week, starting Tuesday, for lots more coverage of the upcoming provincial election, October 19th.